when you go for your job interview, no one's going to ask you how many strikeouts you had or what your batting average was in college, because those things aren't important when you're getting a job. However, how you treat people, how you handle yourself, how how you show good discipline and being thorough with your job, those are things that are important.
Whether you live northeast, west, or south, the best fast pitch info comes from the coach's mouth. Welcome to the From the Coach's Mouth podcast with your hosts, Jay Bolden and Ken Kraus. Hello, everyone. Welcome to From the Coach's Mouth podcast. This is Ken Kraus of Life in the Fast Pitch Lane and Softball Success. And with me is pitching coach extraordinaire, my buddy Jay Bolden of Be Bold Fast Pitch and St. Xavier University. How you doing, Jay?
Good, Ken. How you been? How was the weekend? How was the week? How's the week going so far?
Week's going well. It's been nice. You know, we've had the nice weather here. I know you just got back from Gulf Shores, so you missed the good stuff. But, you had nicer weather down there, I'm sure. But it's been nice here. I think everybody's starting to get into a little bit of softball fever now as it starts to warm up and get a little sunny. We had the change over to daylight saving time, so it's staying light a little bit longer. I think everybody's getting in the softball mood.
Definitely, for sure. We had some good weather down there in Gulf Shores. We did get rained out one day, but really great Gulf Shores trip down there for us. We went up against some of the top teams in the NAIA, faced Georgia Gwinnett, where our buddy Sheets is from, faced them, and they're ranked currently, the softball program there is ranked 6th in the country, and we beat them first game. I think it was 6-1, 1-0, and then lost to them in the second game. So we split with them. Then faced University of Mobile down there, who's ranked they're in the top 20, and we split with them as well. So we came back. I want to say we were 8-2 on the weekend, 7-2, I believe. So we had a really good week down there. The weather was fantastic, and anytime you're close to the ocean like that, it's just it's a good time. So it was good to get away, and the daylight savings time and just the warm weather down there felt really good, and the softball was good too.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. It's great to see that you guys were doing so well. That's always fun. Did that help you get ranked at all?
We feel that we're going to be ranked here in the next polls, which I believe come out here in the next couple days, tomorrow or the day after. We're currently 14-5 right now. We face some of the top competition in the NAIA. We've got another tough one coming up next week against Madonna up in Michigan. They're currently ranked in, I want to say, in the top 15. But we're off to a great start at 14-5. We're getting contributions from our entire bench. Our pitching staff is doing really well. Very, very happy with them. They're putting the work in. They want to compete. I think that's just huge for us. And we haven't even played a home game yet. So once we get through the next 2 weeks here, pretty much we're going to then start our conference play. And that'll be tough, but we're excited about our team this year and what we're doing. So.
Well, that's great. I mean, I'm glad to hear that. Is this kind of an upgrade this year? Have you guys been this powerful all along, or are you kind of experiencing an uptick this year?
St. Xavier University has always been ranked. We've made it to our regionals basically just about the last 4 or 5 years. We've won our conference the last 4 or 5 years. And now the expectation is to make it past that first regional and get to the World Series, and that's the expectation. We've had a lot of kids that have come to us this year. We have a transfer from St. Louis University from Division I that came back. We have an outfielder that transferred from Northern Illinois. We've got a catcher who transferred from Grand Valley. We have some kids that want to come back local and still play high competitive softball. It just wasn't a good fit for where they were at, or just needed to be closer to home. And St. Xavier's always had the expectation of, our goal is to be successful and, and to make it to the next step. And I think that's what we're really focused on. Is that's great that we've made it to regionals. We've won our conference in our conference tournament the last 4 years, 5 years, but now it's time to take it to the next level. And we feel we have a team here in the next couple of years that has the talent to do that. And we're excited about it. Again, as we all know, it depends on who shows up and what day it is, but,
Right.
we feel that the talent is there for this team, and the expectations are high for us as a coaching staff as well as for our players, and we're going to hold them to that high expectation. So hopefully this year ends up where we're getting past the regional into the Women's College World Series, and that's why we're playing tough teams right away. Instead of just waiting, we're getting out and trying to play some of the toughest teams in the country in the NAIA right out of the bat, and just to challenge our players right away.
Well, that's cool. I like to hear that, and it's nice to see, you're a good guy. I know that you're a great pitching coach and all of that. Sounds like you guys are hitting on all cylinders. So, it's exciting to see that.
It's definitely a good season. I want to ask you a couple questions, if you don't mind, Ken, instead of you asking me all the questions today. High school tryouts are pretty much over. How did your girls do? How are you feeling about that? I'm sure you got a lot of text messages telling you what team they're on and all that stuff. So how did your girls do with all the high school tryouts?
Well, actually, I was really happy with what happened with most of them. By the way, before we go on, or before I finish answering that, I just want to let everybody know that's listening today, you might have noticed we don't have any guests today. Jay and I thought that maybe we would just have a chat ourselves. So if you're waiting for us to introduce the guest, there isn't going to be one. So you'll just have to listen to us two knuckleheads for the next however many minutes. Okay, so anyway, back to the high school tryouts. Most of my girls did very well. I was glad to see that they were getting onto the teams where I thought that they could play. Had some girls that made varsity, some freshmen that made varsity. Had some other girls in some very competitive programs that are JV1 versus JV2. Most of the schools, again, I don't know how it is all the way around the country. Most of the schools around here these days have what's called JV1 and JV2. So the JV1 being, the expectations, that's a little bit higher caliber, a little closer to the varsity level. But then the JV2 is more of a mix of freshmen, sophomores, and even juniors. That's a change from when my daughters were playing. Back in those days, they had freshmen, JV, and varsity. A lot of the schools around here now, there's more competition for the same girls. So there's some of them that only have JV and varsity. They don't even have a JV1 and JV2. Is that the same by you?
Yeah, you'll see the same thing out in Indiana as well as Illinois. Same thing. So there are a few teams that do have freshman teams. Those are usually the larger schools, but yeah, Indiana's pretty much the same way. There's a varsity team, JV1, JV2 usually. So, yeah, depending on the size of the school, of course. And then some schools don't even have a JV. So,
right.
You're just getting some of the smaller Indiana schools just have a varsity team, and everybody's kind of on it. They'll pick up a few JV games here or there to let some of the younger players that may not get a lot of playing time get some innings and that kind of stuff. Yeah. So,
okay. Is Indiana one of those states? I know there's some of the less populated states that allow like 8th graders to play on high school teams. Does Indiana allow that?
Nope. You have to be in high school. You have to be a freshman. That's Kentucky. I know my wife grew up down there in Louisville, and it's funny. You'll see some of those kids as 7th graders on varsity teams. And I'm like, wow, that's, it's crazy. But again, if you're that good, some of them can hold their own, I'm sure. So, but Kentucky allows the junior high kids to be a part of those high school programs, which is crazy.
I think, I think West Virginia does too. And our buddy Sean, I think, has had a couple of girls at least that, were 7th or 8th graders that were playing on varsity and doing very well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's, I guess there's two different views on that, but if they can handle themselves, against that competition, Absolutely, let them get after it. But in Indiana, it's predominantly just us being in. You have to be in high school and go
Yeah.
that route. So, but
Yep. Same in Illinois.
did you have any surprises of any kids that you thought should have made it, or were there any strange cuts, or we that always seems to happen around this time of year that some things happen. So
Yeah, I had a couple of them that were strange cuts. The thing I don't get the most, all right, so there'll be kids that, and this is a little bit of a soapbox thing, but there'll be kids that have played for 3 years in a program. They get to be seniors and all of a sudden they get cut by the coach. Now I get, all right, maybe that kid, the coach doesn't feel that kid's up to snuff and isn't going to play. But if you've been with it, why not just give the kid a uniform, be honest with her, tell her it's unlikely you're going to see the field. So you have to make the decision yourself if it's worth it for your time to go through all of this and perhaps never play. But why would you just out and out cut a kid off who wants to be there, wants to be a part of it, wants to represent her school?
yeah, we there's some of that out there too where I'm at. I agree with you. I think I think when I was a high school coach, I always left that decision up to the player, right? Like if you've been a part of our program for 3 years, right? I want you still to be a part of the program. However, we would have that conversation about, hey, listen, this is this is the vision I have of what's going on. You're probably not going to play a lot. There is going to be some opportunities maybe to be, a role player here or there. And if this is something that you still want to be a part of this team, we want you to be a part of this program. However, if it's something you feel that you don't want to, and you don't want to come back, or you want to, make the choice to not play, then I respect that as well too. But at least being upfront and honest with these players, I think is super important, and letting them make that decision as to whether or not that's a role that they want to take on or not. And I think that comes down to I'm going to fast forward a little bit to college. I just had this conversation last night at one of my lessons. Is when you're in college, you're gonna have to wait your turn. And
Yeah.
there sometimes you're waiting 3 years before you get your opportunity. And so that's an important learning piece that people need, and kids and players need to learn, because travel ball and high school ball, it's pretty much down to, if you're on the team, you're going to have, you're going to have some role, especially travel ball. Everybody's going to play. And then these kids get to college and they're like, well, what do you mean I'm not starting? I started all through high school and I started all through travel ball. And you go to college and you got to wait and you got to earn it, and you got to, and there's competition. And I don't know why some of these high school coaches, they're making cuts on kids. They'll make the cut on the kid and then they'll say, well, we want to see you try out next year. Why wouldn't you keep that kid and let that kid have an opportunity to compete, to push the other players so that they have an opportunity? At St. Xavier, our roster is 28. Sometimes we're carry more than that, Ken. Sometimes we carry more than that. And the reason behind that is to create competition every single practice. Every single bullpen is a competition. Every single practice is a competition, right? And that's why you have to have people that are there to push other people, push you to be your best. You're still a teammate, right? And your job, if you're not the starter, is to push the starter to be better. And so when you have a kid that you're going to cut, why not keep that kid and say, hey, listen, you know what? You may have a limited role, but I want you to go out there and work as hard as you can and push everyone else around you to be better. And then give them some opportunities in games that you are whitewashing somebody. Those are important things. And I think some of that gets taken away from some of these kids, especially if you've been in the program 3 years and this is your senior year. Find a role for that kid. Find a role.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing about it too is that there's always, this talk about how you don't have to be on the field to be contributing. I think some of our guests have talked about that, bench players, people that, aren't regular starters and all that kind of thing can still make a contribution. Well, this is an opportunity for those kids, again, if they choose to go into that role, that they would be able to, maybe it's just the quality of them as a human being there, supporting their teammates, kind of being the one that picks everybody up. That's, going to be a positive influence in there. We've certainly all heard stories about that, and even on college teams. I think that there was some stuff. I can't remember if it was Indiana back in the day, but there was a story I remember hearing about a basketball team. And one of the players on there, I think, hardly ever saw any minutes, maybe played 5 minutes their entire career, but was viewed as an MVP because that was the person that was, underneath the basket, tossing the ball back when the star was shooting buckets and all that kind of thing, kept up the positive talk, was always picking up teammates and all that. There's a role there too. And that could, affect someone and help them to develop their leadership skills. That'll be more valuable to them and to society as a whole in the future. So why you would just out and out cut a kid because you don't think they're good enough to be a starter, it just seems like sometimes it's a little petty or vindictive or self-centered. I'm not quite sure what it is.
Yeah, and that's the thing here too, Ken. We've had guests on this podcast already, and my takeaway from most of them has been they don't remember the plays, they remember the people. And I think that's part of this whole thing is that, I'm sure they can tell you specific plays, this and that, and those things. But however, if you were to ask them about the people that they played with and how those good teammates, or you remember Lauren talking about the bad teammates, right? Like, I think those are the people that those are the memories that people have is the people and the players that they played with. No one's going to remember. And I say this all the time. When you go for your job interview, no one's going to ask you how many strikeouts you had or what your batting average was in college, because those things aren't important when you're getting a job. However, how you treat people, how you handle yourself, how you show good discipline and being thorough with your job, those are things that are important. And I think, you learn those things sometimes through waiting your turn, or realizing at times too, like, hey, it's all a process, and this is making me a better person because of it. So I think those are just things that high school coaches have to remember. I'm sure we all want to win. However, it's the bigger picture, right? I always say, like, success to me isn't what kind of scholarship or what kind of school you go to. It's what happens after that. When you're a lawyer, right? Like, not too long ago here, we had a team that I coached here at the high school. Our 2016 got inducted to our high school's Hall of Fame. And those kids, I can't call them kids, they're in their mid-30s now, come back and they're lawyers and they're successful business people and they're moms. And and to me, I felt so much more gratitude from that than any of the wins and losses that we ever had during that season. Just seeing how successful they are in life, that was huge for me, and I think that those are the important things, is that sure, we want to win every game, but in the end, are you making these kids at the time, travel ball kids, high school kids, are you making them better people? That tremendously, that's what this, I think, is all about, especially in the high school setting. Because as we know, high school is a little different than travel. Travel is, hey, we're going to practice twice a week. We're going to do one defense, one hitting, and then you're going to show up on Friday or Thursdays now and play a couple games, and then you guys get to leave. High schools, you're on top of each other 6 days a week.
Right.
You have to learn how to deal with people through those situations. So,
yeah, no, absolutely. And, I also think that, in a high school setting, the whole idea of school-based athletics was to kind of create camaraderie. It was originally, I think, conceived of as more of an after-school activity type of thing. And so it's kind of morphed away from that. And I get that. Everything's more competitive and all of that kind of thing. But there's a reason that a lot of the state organizations won't let high school players practice with their travel teams. They don't want them doing all these things. There's reasons that there are limitations on what the high school coaches can do out of season. They don't want them running practices 4 days a week in the off season so that they can gain an advantage. It's supposed to be something that's there, as we always like to say, for the kids. We're there for the kids.
Yep.
So if you're treating people that way and just kind of arbitrarily cutting kids because you don't think that they're going to help you win more games, rather than saying, this is a good person. Not the most talented kid in the world, but it's what does it cost me to give her a uniform and a seat on the bus?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And those are important things, I think. We've had kids in my area that have chosen not to even go out and play high school softball. And one of these kids is committed to a Division I college. So it just shows you there's a lot of that stuff that goes on in the background that, sometimes we don't know how or why some of these decisions are even made, and so some of those people these kids and parents don't want to deal with that. So on top of that too, I want to talk to you a little bit about, and I think we both kind of deal with this, after the high school season, as we both do a little bit. I do a little bit of hitting. We primarily focus on the pitching side of things, but even with some of the pitchers, I get back. There's just I have concerns every single high school season, and I'm just going to be honest with you. I have the last few high school seasons have come out of that season with a kid that's injured because of just either overuse and not using a staff to pitch. And it's just, it just concerns me every year. And we talk about arm care and all this stuff, but at the same time, you can do all the arm care in the world, but if you got to throw every game, and some of these are non-conference meaningless games, why are you not, take an L to let a kid rest, for goodness sakes?
Right. So, preach, brother. Preach.
If you don't mind, I want to talk a little bit about some of the things I was a high school coach for a long time, and I will see some of these kids come back from high school ball, some of their swings, and I'm like, whoa, what is going on here? Or, oh, well, coach wants me to throw this pitch and she wants me to do this, and that. And my hands just go on my head and I'm like, wait. So you're telling me that we're going to make adjustments on, let's just say 15 swings, right? Because we have 15, let's say we take 15 players on the varsity or JV team, and we're going to fix all 15 swings 2 weeks before our first game. And then, I'm like, where are we at here? Where are we at? I get it. We want to be successful, but at what cost? At what cost are we, everybody can't swing the same way. Everybody can't pitch the same way. We know these things, right? So what are your experiences with that, Ken? Do you have kids that come back from high school season with bum shoulders and bad arms and swings that now look like they're, I don't know, chopping wood? And what's going on? Give me some background.
Okay. And before I go into that side of it, I don't want to make this sound like Jay and I are just here to bash high school coaches. There are many quality high school coaches that understand what they're doing and, really know how to use their players and take care of their players and all that kind of thing. So I don't want to think that, people get the impression that we think that, all high school coaches are bad or high school softball is bad. That's not the case at all.
Yeah, absolutely
but to
not.
answer your
Absolutely
question, But to answer your question, yes, I've seen that too. I've seen, kids. I used to refer to it when I was coaching teams as when they'd come back, I say, okay, now we have to knock the high school off of them because they'd been just given bad advice. There were, coaches who didn't understand things, hadn't learned anything since they'd played 30 years ago. The sport is always evolving, but they were just kind of teaching the same old things and getting in the way. So yes, that can happen. I've seen it come back with the injuries where the coaches are so afraid of losing a game that they will just pitch the same kid in game after game, sometimes 2 games back to back on a Saturday when they have a doubleheader. Or they'll start a kid, they'll try to start a different kid. They'll get behind a little bit and then they'll put the other, their normal starter in there, even though they're meaningless games. They don't really impact anything. And even, you could say that it has to do with the state rankings for when you're going into the playoffs, but those are done fairly early. So if you're in mid-May, those decisions have already been made, I think, in most cases. So a loss here or there is not really going to affect you much other than your ego.
And the crazy thing about that, Ken, is guess who ranks the teams when they're going into their regional or sectional? It's the coaches, right? So it's not the state. The state is not ranking anybody, right? So you get a list of your, let's say in your sectional, you've got 17 teams in there. You've got to rank everybody from 1 to 17, right? So when you do that, now that's how you're getting the 1 seed and the 17 seed, and so on and so forth. And then that's what they're doing. And your regional and sectional is based off where you're located at. So now those rankings, there's coaches that don't even fill those out sometimes. There's some schools, those coaches don't even fill them out. So,
yeah,
I think those are the important things. Like, if it's a non-conference game, and you've pitched the kid 2 games already, let her have a break. You know what I mean? Pitch somebody else, because you got to develop kids as well too. Part of that is developing. I will say, like, the good side of the high school stuff is the amount of reps the kids get. And I think that there is some really good skill building stuff with high school coaches. I think they do a good job of that. I think how much you're tweaking, though, I think is something that you definitely they need to pay attention to. But like you said, there are great high school coaches out there. Some that are definitely into it and are teaching the game the right way. So I think too, like we'll see a little bit, like even at the college level, Ken, like, some of the pitchers come back and they're like, well, coach wants me to throw a screwball. And you're like, well, you don't have a screwball. So you're going to teach one that, it's like we have to keep doing things so like other people don't know, like this is a new trick you have. And it's like, new trick. It's like, what you've had has been working for you. So do we really have to teach a kid a screwball or some other pitch that, they're just going to learn here, maybe their, junior year or senior year, and that pitch is going to be the best pitch because we just learned it and they've never seen it before. Like you know what I mean? Have you ever had any kids come back to you with that?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I hear kids, that will say, my coach says I need this or I need that. And I just roll my eyes. If you look, I think that, and again, they're extraordinary athletes, but I don't think Jordy Ball's having any problems. Everybody knows her. Everybody's seen her. She's still racking up the strikeouts. Kennedy's still racking up the strikeouts. There's a lot of pitchers out there who are doing really, really well, and they don't have 15 pitches. It's not, to me, it's not a matter of they know all your pitches now and you're getting hit. It's like, well, maybe coach, it's your pitch calling strategy that's the problem. Maybe you're predictable. Maybe you're going too much to one thing or one zone, and the hitters have adjusted. So I would say, look internally first and kind of see, maybe, you pay the math teacher or, the computer science teacher to put in the data and use AI to identify if there's any patterns or things that are maybe not obvious to you, but are obvious to your opponents.
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it as well too. I had a kid in college. Coach wanted her to learn a screwball, and all those mechanics bled into everything else, and the command then went away. And it's just, I'm like, you are more of a vertical pitcher, up and down, changing speeds. East and west is not your gig, and now they want you to be east and west, and those are not your better pitches. And I would say this all the time. And when we're doing our standards, even at St. Xavier or anywhere else I've ever been, I would say this all the time, Ken. Your strengths as a pitcher is going to be the batter's weakness. And we're going to use and focus on your strengths, right? And we'll look and see what the batter's doing, but we're not going to create new pitches. And, you got your fourth pitch. I'm not going to call your fourth best pitch. I'm just not going to, because it's probably not going to move well. It's probably not going to be, it's not going to be located well. I'm going to stick with kind of what your bread and butter is, moving zones and quadrants. And we're going to kind of look at that and see what we're doing instead of let's create a brand new pitch. right? I mean, I'm all about pitch design.
Yeah.
However, I think it has to be within the framework of the pitcher,
Yeah.
And so I know we're getting off of that a little bit, but again, as these teams get into conference play, like we're getting into conference play right now, at St. Xavier, or you see all of the conference games are now happening. Division I, you got the Big East is getting ready to go. The A10's getting ready to start. Everybody's starting the conference games. Well, I was talking about this last night. 643 Charts has really kind of, it's a wonderful program. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's kind of dummied down coaching. They give you all the information. So the scouting report tells you everything. They'll tell you the spray charts of this kid. They'll tell you the number of times the kid throws this pitch or that pitch, and you have these scouting reports readily available to you for your players. And so everybody does know everything about you. However, I still believe if you are a hard drop ball pitcher, like you just talked about Jordy Ball, right?
Yeah.
3 pitches, has her fastball / drop ball, right?
Right.
Has her changeup, has a rise. She's still doing pretty good because her strengths are that batter's weakness, right? And I think that's kind of where, we get into this thing of like, why do we have to have 7 pitches? Let's have 3 really good pitches, and hopefully one of them is an off-speed changeup, and go from there. So
yeah, and when I'm developing pitchers, okay, and working, especially if I get them pretty young, if I get them around 10 or 11, or even a little bit younger and all that, we'll go along, and I will eventually expose them to pretty much every pitch, with incidentally the screwball being the last option. But I'll have them do all those pitches because I want to find out what they throw best. And then, let them work through those things. They can have those things, but eventually they're going to narrow it down to what they can use to get people out. So you say, okay, this kid, she's just, she's got a great rise ball, or she's got a great curve ball, but her drop ball, man, we can get it to work, but it's a chore. Let's say, well, then we're probably not going to throw that drop ball anymore. Maybe we'll just throw a fastball down low in the zone and, hope that it accidentally drops. But we're going to use that, to keep her from being too predictable. But I want her to find out what she throws well, and let's focus on those things.
Yeah, it's working within the framework of that kid. I think that's super important for especially when you're pitch calling. I think that's incredibly important to know what's going to work for some kids and not. And again, to me, I see a lot more drop balls now at the college level. Are you seeing the same thing? Or
yeah,
I see a lot more down. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's still a ton of rise. It's more what I'm trying to say is I'm seeing more vertical.
Yeah,
right. Things are going more vertically, and the drop ball is getting used a lot more. It's funny. I have one of my kids. She's at Florida International right now. She's in the top. I want to say top 50 or 60 with the lowest ERA. And Ken, this summer I've had this kid since she's pretty much 15, and first few lessons I'm like, well, do you have a drop ball? No, I don't have a drop ball. Well, we need to learn a drop ball because it's going to help you out when you get to the college level. So 2 years at Florida International, and has the drop ball, but not. She walked in last summer and she's like, Coach Jay, I need a drop ball. We've got to get the drop ball locked in. And honestly, I feel like that's why she's had such a great year this year, because her drop ball is really good. She's getting a lot of ground balls. Of course, her team is playing good defense. And so a lot of the vertical movement is stuff that we're starting to see, in the game. I think there was a stat, I say this all the time, like if you look at the Women's College World Series last year, I think they said 80% of the pitches thrown were rise balls. Yeah. So I think, the vertical game is always going to give hitters fits, especially with the way some of the kids swing.
Well, and I think that, some of it too is I think it runs in cycles. So for a while there, you weren't seeing changeups anymore. Everybody was like, get those kids that can throw 70 miles an hour, throw it up in the zone, and get the hitter swinging underneath it and all that kind of thing. But, after a while, hitters catch on to that, and they're starting to look that way, and they become more disciplined about the up in the zone stuff. So you throw them down in the zone, you start throwing drop balls, and it works. Or you start changing speeds on them. I think, again, Kennedy did a great job of that, really bringing back the changeup, and all of a sudden everybody went, oh yeah, you know what? If you change speeds, that's harder to hit.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I talk about a lot, especially in lessons, is not just getting the changeup to change speeds, but I'm also looking for spin rate on that ball as well now. If you are watching some of those changeups in the Women's College World Series or just at the Division I level, some of those kids are spinning their changeup with more revolutions than some of their curves or screwballs. And I think, that's huge because that's that deception piece that people really need to understand. Change of speed is great because it messes up timing. However, if you can really focus on getting some spin rate on your changeup to make that pitch, kind of tunnel or look just like another pitch that you're throwing, I think that also helps with the deception piece of the changeup. And so I've really had a lot of focus with my kids in my lessons on, okay, that's great that you've got the speed off of that pitch. I love that. However, let's try to spin it a little more so we can kind of blend that in with something else. So I think you're seeing some of those kids, at the Division I level, even at our level, NAI, D2, D3, like some of those changeups are spinning tremendously.
Are they spinning forward or backward or both?
Well, I think you have some that are kind of doing both. You'll see some kids that are, doing a turnover / flip change that are getting some solid curveball movement on that where the ball's breaking low and away to the right-handers. It was funny because we had, Gwiz on here was our guest last week, and he's one of the people that had one of my kids who's a really good rise ball pitcher that went to one of his camps, and he taught her a rise ball, or excuse me, a changeup that kind of mirrors her rise ball, and it's really, really good. And it's like, okay, those two pitches are matching. They're deceptive. One's coming in at this speed, but they both look identical. So the hitter has to pick that out. And, again, that's props to him for doing that. When that kid came back, I was like, absolutely, that makes sense. We have a kid at St. Xavier's the same way. Her primary pitch is up pitch. So we worked on a changeup to get her more of, it's got, backspin on it a little bit where, it looks like her rise ball, except it's a different speed.
Yeah. Well,
so,
I was just going to say that, with that too, is that also has kind of a different look. I've described it. Some changeups look like they're floating, and I love those. They have kind of a float to them that throws the hitter off. It's like the brain is looking for a certain speed, and all of a sudden it has a completely different look to it. It's like it's not identifiable, but it just makes the hitter go, wait, what? And then by the time they figure it out, the ball is by them. And then there are some that it looks like it's sliding across the ice. And I think that's kind of that backspinny type where it's like kind of coming in there. So it not only looks like it's going to be their rise ball, but then there's something also that's just a little bit off about it. And that makes them feel like, the hitter's like, wait, what? And then, it just helps with that deception.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, that's been a big focus for me recently in lessons with some of the players I have is, let's get some spin on that. And I talk to them all the time. Like if you're focusing on the spin and the fingers when you're releasing that ball, you're already going to kill a little more speed anyway, just because you're letting the fingers play, right? And and again, are we feeling the ball come off fingers? What fingers? That's kind of important for changeups, and I think that's kind of where we're at with it too. And it's been a theme of mine for the last, I want to say couple months is, okay, great. Changeup is good. You're throwing it at 43 miles an hour, but let's look at the spin rate on that thing. Can we get that spin rate up to be more deceptive so that we can tunnel that with, say, your curveball or your drop ball, right? Or your rise, like we're talking about. And I think that's when you see successful pitchers is when they can throw that changeup and it looks like something completely different than a changeup.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And then there's, of course, always the problem. I can't tell you how many times I've seen, people that are telling kids, all right, so to make it change speeds, just slow your arm down a little bit.
Oh boy.
Oh, God, that's like the worst thing. So I had a girl come back and tell me that she had been, she did, one of those like showcase type of things or something. And, she throws a great changeup. All right. Very deceptive. And I will tell you that the primary changeup that I teach, kids come back all the time from tournaments and stuff that it's umpires are telling them and opposing coaches are telling them your changeup is just amazing. So this kid, she said that the people that were at this thing told her, oh, you need to throw a handshake changeup. I'm like, all right, first of all, stay in your lane. You're there to take the numbers, write them down, and move the kids through. Don't start giving these kids advice when you don't know anything about them and you've never seen them in a game or anything else. But beyond that, every kid I've ever seen that, kind of tries to throw that handshake changeup has to slow her arm down because there just isn't enough there to take the speed off the ball. Not sufficient.
Not just that, Ken, but I've got kids that will come in and stop their arm dead red. Boom, like bam. And it infuriates me.
Yes.
I am like, first of all, if we even think that is healthy, we live in a different planet.
Yeah.
You should not be stopping an arm to slow a changeup down. And I try to explain to them all the time, right? It's even the grip, right? If you look at, there was the reel that came out with Jordy Ball.
Yeah.
And she talked about her changeup grip. Her changeup grip is just like her fastball grip.
Yep.
Right? Because she knows how to kill the speed on that ball. And the grip, honestly, doesn't matter.
Right.
It doesn't matter. You'll see knuckles on things. You'll see 5 knuckles on a ball. You'll see this, and you're just like, well, why are you doing that? And coach said that this is how we're going to be able to slow the ball down more. And I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Like that's not the case. Like that's a Band-Aid. I say all the time, that is a Band-Aid.
Yeah. That's a fundamental misunderstanding of how to take speed off or what creates speed to begin with.
And it's a Band-Aid. So yeah, you can put a couple fingers, you can hold the ball tighter. You can do that. Right. And it might slow it down. However, when I ask him when your changeup's bad, what does it do? Well, it's high. Well, that tells me right there that we don't know how to kill speed.
Right.
Right. Or it's in the dirt.
Yeah. It's rolling.
Same thing. Like, yeah. Like if we're not understanding of what is happening and how to kill the speed with a changeup, then we're going to struggle no matter what grip you use.
Okay.
Right. And so,
yeah. And I'm going to just throw in there with this too. Speaking of grips, for the love of God, people stop teaching the circle change, especially to girls with small hands. They can't hold the ball very well. So they're going to do all kinds of crazy things that are going to hurt them. Plus the fact that as soon as that ball comes out of the glove, wherever it is, that's the most obvious grip to pick. And if you can pick a change up, you can hit a change up.
For sure. That's the fun part where when we're playing these teams, I'll talk to our head coach and our assistant coach. I'm like, all right, your job is to try to pick the changeup, right? So where can we look? So I'll tell them. So like, if they're not going to hide the ball in their mitt, and they're going to have a grip, or they're going to use knuckles,
yeah,
then we're going to pick that every time, And then if they are doing that, then we talk about their feet. And I say this all the time, like really good coaches will be able to pick your kid's changeup because what do they do on changeups, Ken? You said it already. They do what? They slow things down.
Yep.
So if your drive mechanics look what do I want to say? If they look lacking,
right,
you're going to already, as a really good pitching coach or coach, all I do is watch the feet. If I can't see the grip, the second thing I look at is the feet. If those feet are not being explosive like they are on their fastballs, then I know the changeup is coming. Right. And then you're just yelling sit. You're just yelling sit to your kids and they know. And I think that's part of it. So if you're not hiding the grip and you're using knuckles or you're using circle change, you're going to get picked.
Yep.
Even if you have a backswing, you're going to get picked there too. If you're not, again, why you and I talk about this all the time with, our other people that we collaborate is not slowing down on the changeup. I last night I had this same conversation with a kid I'm working with, and I'm like 3 things on a changeup: stay tall, stay fast, and stay away.
Yeah.
Right. And we know, because we know how to kill the speed. If we know how to kill it, we're not going to slow it down because it's going to already happen. But our timing will be off if we slow things down, which then makes our release be late. And then our changeup is either A, high, or B, rolling in the dirt. And that's not a good changeup.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always tell my kids with it, I said, I've worked on the changeups that I'm teaching you. And I teach more than one depending on what the kid needs. So I have different options, but I have one that's kind of the primary one. And I tell them I've really perfected this over years, stolen ideas from a lot of people, synthesize it, put it in here. And, just if you throw this thing the way it's designed to be thrown, the harder you try to throw it, the slower it's going to go. It's a mystery.
Absolutely.
It's a mystery of life. But, if you just get in and throw the snot out of that ball, it's going to change speeds for you and you're not going to have to tip it.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. So those are just some things, been my themes recently here.
Yep.
At lessons.
So I want to go back to something you had said that's kind of related to all of this, but it's that whole thing of, people trying to change a kid, especially if the kid's already being successful. So I had this come up. This is actually one of my college players, just been putting up monster numbers. And then I heard through the grapevine over the last couple of weeks, I guess, her team, somebody, one of the coaches on her team has been trying to tinker with her swing, and her hitting went downhill a little bit. She's real smart, and she went, okay, yeah, all right, well, enough of that. Now I just say okay, and I just ignore them. But, there's, I always think about, it was originally a NASCAR thing, but if you think about it, you go, how do you take a college hitter and get her to hit 300? Start with a 400 hitter and tinker with her swing.
Yeah, there you go. That's perfect, right? It's perfect. I think, there are some things like we talk about this all the time at St. Xavier, right? We don't care how you get there. You just got to get there and you got to be on time.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's one of the things, like we're not into tinkering and overhauling. However, if you're struggling, we have to break some things down.
Right.
And,
right.
And here's what I'll tell you, Ken, I've said this thousands of times. I'm sure you have too, especially talking on the travel ball side of things or high school ball side of things. You want to come to a kid's lesson? Come.
Yes.
I actually encourage that. And I have had some travel ball coaches that have come to a couple lessons, and I bring them in there. And one was that a couple people were messing with a kid that in her drop ball. And I've had this kid since she's basically 7 years old. So it's been a long time, and they're trying to tell her to do something different on her drop ball. And so I told the coach, I said, the head coach, I said, why don't you come in? I said, I'm sure that these other coaches who are dads aren't trying to hurt anybody. They're in the best interest of the kid. However, we don't want to do that. So when he came in there, I kind of told him, I said, hey, listen, I go, do you do any instruction with some of your kids that, on your travel team? Yeah. Oh yeah. I've got this girl. She's, we've worked on her swing. She's hitting the ball so awesome right now. And we've made some huge strides. I said, that's great. Now imagine that she comes in here and I tell her to do everything opposite of what you told her to do. Would you be happy with that? And he's like, absolutely not. And that's my point to him is like, hey, come in here. Let's get on the same page. So then that way everything is consistent when you're trying to make adjustments to the kid. Then I don't have a problem with it, right? As long as we're on the same page. But for you just to have some random person whose daughter might pitch a different way and tell them to pitch this way, that may not work for them. And now you're just kind of unraveling all of the work that we've done over the last 7 years.
Yeah. Somebody who saw a reel,
right?
On the internet.
Yes. Yes. So I would say you're more than welcome to come to this kid's lesson and ask all the questions you want. If you don't understand it, or if this is what you're seeing, I want to know that as her pitching coach so that we can help you and your team be better and help this kid at the same time. And that's just collaboration, and people don't want to do it. I think that's one of the biggest things about, I love the softball community with my heart, but at times everybody bottles things up. And again, just, let's just work together so we can help kids. Right. And in the end, it will also help your team. So Go. If you're a high school coach or a travel ball coach, reach out to their pitching coach and their hitting coaches and go to a lesson. Then you can ask questions and tell them what you're seeing, because what you're seeing as a travel coach, the hitting coach may not see. And they may want that information only to help this kid and to help you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had high school coaches that have come before, not a lot, but a few. And I've had travel coaches and stuff. And when they come in, they kind of sit outside the cage respectfully and they say, I just want to listen. And I say, come on in, come in the cage with me so you can hear better. Ask me any question you want to ask. The ones that do come are usually looking for, do you have any tips? What do I say to this girl if she's struggling with X? They want to hear what I'm telling them so that they can repeat that and reinforce it. And I'm like, God bless you. This is the way it should work. And, if you tell me that in games she's having this problem, I want to know that, because I'm not seeing it in the cage, but the cage isn't the game. And, we have
100%.
We have to remember that the cage isn't the game. So if all of a sudden she's tensing up and she throws a great curveball when there's no pressure, but she can't throw that curveball or that rise ball to save her life in a game, I need to know that so that I can kind of work with her either on her mental side of things, or maybe there's something different she's doing that she doesn't even realize. Let's get together and make this work so that, we can all be successful.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, Ken, this is, like I told you, I was a high school coach for a long time. And anytime I had pitchers, I would go to the pitching coach's lesson. Right?
Yeah.
So here we are. I have a freshman coming in, lots of talent, throws the ball really hard. And I'm like, listen, I want to go to your pitching lesson. So I go, and her pitching coach is Margie Wright. Legend.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So I go in there and what am I doing? I told her, I said, Margie, here's what I want to do. I want to know what you want her to do for her workup, for her warm up, because we're going to put it in the dugout with a little checklist so that she stays consistent with what you got going on, so that this kid can be consistent with us here. Right? Didn't make changes to the kid, stayed in line with that pitching coach's philosophy of what she wanted that kid to do. However, I'm like, tell me what you wanted to do for the warm up, how, and blah, blah, blah. And I put it up in the dugout, and I made the kid do that every single time. And I think that was great. And she was the same thing. She's like, well, if you see something that's not working, please communicate with me so that on the next lesson we can work on it. And that's what it's about, And I think, it's about working with what you have. We had another quick story is, I had a bunch of kids that I was a high school coach, and my first year there, their swings weren't great. We had a lot of strikeouts, a lot of pop-ups, right? I didn't come in and say, we're going to change everybody's swing. I know who you go to for hitting lessons. That's wonderful. Keep going to that person. They're awesome. However, here's what we're going to do. Before we throw you a ball down the middle, you're going to hit 10 balls opposite field before you can move on to the next thing, which really just made them get to the ball, let the ball travel a little bit more, because we were so aggressive as hitters. And I think that year we led the conference in opposite field home runs. So I, didn't change anybody's swing, Ken.
Right.
Didn't change anybody's swing. Like, hey, we got to do this and that. However, what I did was just look at the swing and say, hey, we need to be able to cover that outside of that plate a little bit more. So when we're in the cages, you got to hit 10 to 15 balls opposite field first. Then we'll start working middle of the plate for you to unleash. I would call it smoke the middle. And so, I think those are things as coaches, we can kind of help kids out without changing what they're doing, just giving them a different thing that they have to work on.
Yeah. And I think that, the other part of that too is when you take a look at it and say, all right, where am I going to get the best bang for the buck if I am going to mess with something? Don't take my top 3 hitters and try to fix their swings. If I've got a kid, let's say my kid's hitting 350. If she starts hitting 365, that probably doesn't have a whole lot of impact on my team scoring runs. But if I've got 4 or 5 girls in my starting lineup that are hitting 210, 250, even, $125, something like that, and I can get them up to 290 or 310 or something like that, now I'm going to be scoring a lot more runs. Put the emphasis on the bottom part of it if you're going to do it at all. The other thing I often think about with that too is
and you mentioned this earlier, and it really is true, Jay, that, like at the high school level, they get 2 weeks of practice and then theoretically they're out playing games. You're not going to do much there. The truth of the matter is as far as mechanics go and that sort of thing, no matter how knowledgeable you might be or how knowledgeable you may think you are, that you're just not going to be able to do much in there. You're basically a NASCAR driver. Your job is not to fix the engine. Let the mechanics fix the engine. Your job is to figure out how to drive the car. In the case of something like that, to me, the head coach, the team coaches, what they need to do is figure out all these individual pieces they have. What philosophy do we have? What are my kids good at? How do we set up our offense? How do we set up our defense and all of that to take advantage of what they can do so we can win ball games? If your travel team covers bunts one way and the high school team wants to cover them different ways, I say you listen to the high school coach. That's what they want to do. That's what their job is. If you want to have cuts done a certain way, anything that's kind of like getting all the pieces moving and working together, that to me is where a coach, a high school, and even to some extent with the rules that they have now with a college coach, is that's really where they're going to get their bang for the buck, is figure out what your kids can do and then use that to its best advantage.
And be efficient.
Yes.
Right? Use your time efficiently. One line of people and you hitting ground balls to one line or two lines of people is not efficient.
Yes.
Be efficient, right? I talk about this all the time with development. Kids at young ages need lots of reps. So you sitting there hitting a ball to a line of kids at shortstop, 10 kids deep, is not going to help anybody.
No.
Break them down, work on footwork, separate into different stations, work through it, come together at the end, do those kinds of things. I think more reps, especially at the younger age, is so important. And even with us at the college level, people think it's like, oh, you're going to get to college and man, they're going to do all these amazing drills and you're just going to be, and all of a sudden, like, right, what do you think we start with? We start with our everydays or our dailies every single day, which means what? We're on our knees fielding a ball. We're working our forehand and our backhand with our partner. Right?
Yeah.
Then what are we doing? We're rolling balls to people. We're rolling balls first. Then we're hitting balls. Then we're working on, again, it's fundamentals. It starts. It doesn't change at the highest level. As a matter of fact, I would say most college coaches are still focusing on fundamentals at that high of a level because that's what wins you games, not fancy stuff. Now, I will say this. One thing I did take away from Tim Walton when I went to a coach's clinic was, at the end of his practice, he does have them try like some crazy plays, like where they'll kind of flip the ball behind their back or under their legs. And he's just like, hey, you never know when that moment might exist. And so it's better to try that. And again, the players have fun with that too. Like they'll run in a circle and I'll have them throw in a circle. And so those are things that I think are important, but are we spending 80% of our time at practice with some crazy, amazing drill? No, we're not. We're focusing on fundamentals, right? And I think that's super important too. And here's the thing. Just one more thing is you got me all fired up right now.
Good. Go for it.
I remember as a high school coach, I made my kids throw every day.
Yes.
And I kick myself for that every day now, Ken, because there were times when we got to the end of the season where I had kids that their arms were dead. And I'm not talking about pitching here. I'm talking about even overhand throwing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to scale it back. 6 days of throwing overhand is going to wear on you over the course of 3 months.
Okay.
Kids, again, doesn't matter how much arm care. So we would break it down and we would have a no throw Wednesday. You would come in, right? And we would do drills where all you would do is put the ball in the bucket. So we would work on footwork. We'd work on fielding. We'd come up into our separation. We'd come into our throwing. And then all we would do is put the ball in the bucket. And that the year after I started doing that, all of a sudden I had fresh arms when it came tournament time. It's throwing more doesn't make you stronger, right? Especially if your throw isn't good and your mechanics aren't good anyway. And we know that throwing mechanics, overhand throwing mechanics aren't always the best, right?
Right.
Some kids, everybody does it differently. The point of that was saving those arms for when the arms needed to be important was important to me. And giving them a day or two of rest, of not throwing, was just as important as throwing.
Yeah, that wasn't as much of an issue for me because I never coached high school ball. I was only doing travel ball, so I didn't have them every day. But yeah, we would still do that with the buckets too. But when you talk about throwing, a stat that always stuck with me when I went to a coaching clinic very early in my career, and I can't remember who said it might have been Cindy Bristow, but whoever it was emphasized that 80% of all errors are throwing errors. So when I would start up a team, like let's say in the fall, first practice, man, we would work on throwing, and it'd just be simple throwing from about 40 feet. Just kind of go back and forth with it. And I had what I called the 1 minute drill. So I would stand there with a stopwatch in my hand because having the stopwatch and timing things makes it, puts a little bit of pressure on them. I say, okay, all we need to do is for 1 minute, okay, we're going to throw and catch. And if we throw and catch successfully, no drops, no throwaways or anything like that, then we move on to the next thing. And as they were doing it, I'd be calling it out. I'd say, okay, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, 45 seconds. And I can't tell you, I bet you pretty much every year I did that. The first practice that we did that on, I had probably 20 minutes allotted for it, and we might go an hour. But I would not let them stop. And again, we weren't stressing their arms, but I would not let them stop. And I said, there's not a required number of throws you have to do. All you have to do is throw it to your partner, and your partner just has to catch it and pay attention. But I'll tell you what, Jay, we cut down severely on our errors. My teams did not make many errors because we tried to do our best to take 80% of the errors out of it just by learning how to throw.
It makes total sense. Again, the game is, it's from Bull Durham.
Yeah.
You throw the ball, you catch the ball, you field the ball, right?
Yeah.
It's the basic fundamentals of what this game truly is about. And saving those extra runs are super important. So, Well, Ken, I know you and I could go on forever, but I think we've covered quite a bit. And I just, I hope people that are listening to this, whether you're a high school coach or travel ball coach, take something away from a little bit of what Ken and I both shared today. I thought, there's some good tidbits in there if you're looking for it. And again, I say it all the time. We ask our players to put extra work in, but are we as coaches doing the same thing? Are we still learning, or do we think we know it all? I know you and I, Ken, we're lifelong learners. We know we don't know it all. And I tell people all the time, like, if I don't know it, it's a good thing because then I get to learn it. And I think, they're the same way. And I feel like, as travel ball coaches and high school ball coaches, I think, even as instructors, we just want to keep learning and growing. So is there anything else you want to share with us before we wrap this up? Or
Yeah, I was just going to reinforce the same kind of thing. Is it always that learning thing? And it's a cliche, but it's a truism as well, that the more that I learn, the less I know. It's just like they always talk about, you're climbing up the hill and you think, okay, I just need to get to the top of the hill. When you get up to the top of the hill, you get a better view of what the next higher hill is. And it's just a continuing thing. And the more you find that you are learning, the more effort you put into all of those things, to me, the better success you're going to have and the more fun you're going to have with it too. It's really cool when you can take a kid and figure out something new that helps this girl that couldn't do something before. And now all of a sudden she can do it and she's contributing and she feels better about herself. To me, it's just the greatest feeling in the world. And that's what keeps me going with it all the time.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more, buddy.
All right. Well, Jay, it's been great talking to you. I'm sure we were both wondering, without a guest here, what would we talk about? And here we've been going on and on for over an hour. Thanks to everybody that's hung in there this long. If you've listened to the whole thing, we really appreciate it. If you listen to part of it, we appreciate you too, but we really like the fact that, if you've hung in there this long with us, that's a great thing. Makes me feel good.
Absolutely. We appreciate you. And again, the whole goal of all of this is just to help people, help coaches grow. hear from others besides Ken and I, which is why we're just kind of like at a middle part here of where we're at with our episodes and just trying to get a pulse of it. And we like to talk as well too. So definitely we'll have some more guests coming up here. We'll be working on that this week. We've got a list and we're staying on target with that. So I look forward to getting some more awesome guests for some of our listeners. So again, thank you guys for listening so far. Hopefully you're finding it, valuable to some of you coaches out there.
Yeah. And if you are, make sure that you subscribe on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a comment if you want to comment on something good, bad, and different. We do check that. If you've got something you'd like us to cover or somebody you know that you think would be a good person to talk to, you can let us know that as well. All right. So on behalf of From the Coach's Mouth, this is Ken saying thank you.
Thanks, everybody. It's Jay. We appreciate you guys.
All righty. We'll talk to you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.